about today?
Why don't we talk about vicarious liability?
Interesting.
Big word.
Big word.
Definitely a big word. So what is vicarious liability? Vicarious liability means that there's someone else that can be held responsible for the acts of another. Like in the scenario in our law firm, I can be held responsible for the acts of my assistant. Walgreens is the truth. Walgreens can be held responsible for the acts of their employees. Parents can be held responsible for the acts of their children. So even if you're the owner, even if you didn't do anything specific, you can still be held responsible for the acts of that person.
Right, yeah. In a car accident case, the owner is responsible for what happens with their car. So
Even if they're not driving it.
bingo.
Got it.
Yeah, especially if they're not driving it, because it makes people make better decisions on who they give their car to if they're going to be ultimately at fault. So that's probably the most common example of vicarious liability. I know there are others.
That's a good one. That's
Yeah.
good. I mean, it's the same thing for like a hospital and the hospital employees, right? So the hospital is named as a defendant, but it's a building. So they're responsible as employers of the doctors, nurses, lab techs, whoever is rendering care to that individual patient. That's vicarious liability.
But it's not always the same causes of action against the owner that would be against the person who causes the act. And for example, your child goes out and is drinking and driving and harms someone. While they may be liable for punitive damages, which is essentially punishment type money, the vicarious person may not be responsible for those.
Right.
So there's
Depending on-
different lines of damage that the vicarious liability party may not be responsible for in the same way that the person who committed the act was.
So this comes up a lot in cases where I represent sexual assault survivors. So, employees who commit sexual assault or sexual abuse upon patients, let's just say, clearly that's not within the scope of their employment. So how would the employer be responsible for potentially the criminal acts of their employees? It's very fact specific. It really depends, and it really requires analysis. But in a number of these scenarios, they are responsible vicariously or through their own negligence for not hiring the right kind of person, not supervising the right kind of person, or not having safety measures in place. That's another way that they're more directly responsible for the acts of these employees.